One of the things I didn't tell you about when I was in college is that I also quit going to church. See, I was a pastor's kid. I was raised a pastor's kid. My dad's a pastor. He's been a pastor as long as I've ever known. And when I was 3 years old, people would ask me, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I told them I wanted to be a pastor. Like any 3-year-old really knows what in the world that's all about. Of course, I also wanted to make toys, and I also wanted to be a fireman, but I thought making toys would be cooler because then I'd get them for free, right? But being a pastor was always there too. And so I grew up, I was part of church, I did the church thing my entire life growing up. And then when I got to college, my freshman year, I got to experience for the first time a church without my dad up front talking. And a church without my mom leading the Sunday school program, and a church without my circle of friends and relationships and stuff. And so I was totally on my own, and now I had to weigh the merits of going to church all on its own. And I remembered being there for a while, and I began to get bored of the guy talking. Because every week he'd just tell us another story, like I'm telling you a story. He'd tell us another story, and I'd be like, oh man, another story, for crying out loud. And he never actually opened the Bible and taught me anything. And I grew tired of that, and I decided, well, this isn't really building me up. So I quit going to that church, and then the rest of my freshman year, I kind of bounced around to different church things, trying to find a place for me, and it never really clicked. And so then for summer, I went home, and then the next year, I came back. And my sophomore year, there was a church in town that offered me a job, and I thought, okay, if they're going to pay me to go to church, that's a good reason to go to church. So then I decided to go to that church, and I spent all year playing music for them and leading their youth program. So then I was being paid. It was a job. It wasn't really like I was going to church. I was just doing a job, you know. But at the end of that year, I decided I really didn't want to stay there during the summer. I wanted to go back home. I had this weird dream of living on the beach and kind of being a bum for the summer, which worked out for me. But that's another story. So I quit that job, and that church ended up closing its doors a couple weeks later. I helped kill a church. Well, that weighs on you heavily sometimes. So then anyway, I went home to be home for the summer, and then I came back the next year, and the next year I didn't have a church again. And so I decided, listen, I'm just sick of doing this thing. I'm sick of doing this thing. So since I went to a Christian school, there were flyers everywhere for churches because they all wanted us to come. And there was this one flyer that I saw called Harvest Fellowship, and I thought it was interesting, so I gave him a call. And I said, can you guys give me a ride? The guy on the phone said, yeah, I'll give you a ride. And so the next Sunday, he picks me up in his car, and we drive, and we park in front of a house. We pull into the driveway. There are like 5, 6 cars there, and we're in the driveway of a house. And I'm beginning to freak out because this guy brought me here, you know. There's no way I can get home. I'm stuck. Whatever happens here, happens here. And so I said, are we in the right place? Are we picking someone else up? He goes, no, this is it. This is the right place. And so I walked through the front door, and instantly I was just washed over with people coming over to me, shaking my hand, introducing themselves to me, saying how great they thought it was that I was there, and telling me to go get some food. And I was like, we're moving up, okay? This is getting better. So I said, okay, where is it? So they shuffled me over to the table. Everybody huddled around the table. We prayed. And there on this table was this spread of bacon and sausage and eggs and hash browns and pastries and muffins and bananas and all kinds of stuff. And I just was in awe that this could be church. And so I'm eating, you know, and we're celebrating together. And then after about 20 minutes of this, we go into the other room and we sit down. And this guy, I later found out his name was Casey, he picks up a guitar, and he sits down on this one chair, and everybody else sits down in chairs, and then it goes quiet. And I was really, really weirded out. The food was cool, but now we're just sitting around in a circle doing nothing. Until someone said, can we sing this one song? And so then Casey starts strumming this song, and they passed out these songbooks, and we started singing these songs. And then after that song was over, it got quiet again. And I'm sitting there, like my dad's a pastor, okay? I know how church is supposed to go. And I'm there absolutely out of my mind, uncomfortable, until another person says, I've got a verse I want to read. And they read it. And then another person says, they just start praying. And then we sing another song, and then it just kind of popcorn happens around the room like that. And 3 hours later, I look at my watch and I'm like, what just happened? And they look at me, they say, do you need to go back to school? And I'm like, well, yeah, lunch is almost done. So they drive me back, and my roommate comes back to the dorm later that night, and he says, how was it? I said, dude, I have no idea. That was literally the most uncomfortable church experience I have ever had in my life. And then I said, but I want to go back. Because there was something fascinatingly weird about a bunch of people who just wanted to be Christians with each other in the same room. And I began to realize something. That for my whole life, I had been following the church script. You know, the church script that says, it's Sunday, therefore you wake up at this particular time, you go to this particular place, you sit in this particular row, you listen to this particular person do this particular kind of thing, and then when that particular thing is done, you go back to home. And maybe, if you're lucky, someone will invite you to brunch, and you go to brunch first, and then you go home, and then you start the rest of your week. And my dad was a pastor, and I was convinced that we could get out of church a whole half an hour earlier if we just stopped the music thing. Just get my dad up there, let him talk, and then we could leave sooner. I thought that would be so much better. And I realized that I was just following the script. But here's the deal. If you follow a script, you're just an actor. Right? You know, Jesus doesn't like actors. I'm not saying actors like we have today. I'm saying the old kind of actors, the word that refers to people who just follow a script. Because, see, in the ancient Greek, you know what the word Jesus would have used if he was going to say actor? Hypocrite. That's the word. If you're taking notes, go ahead and jot this down. Actor is hypocrite. So when Jesus says to the Pharisees in Matthew 15, when he says, you hypocrites, what he's saying is, you are actors. You guys are just following a script. There's nothing in your heart. If you're crying, it's because someone told you to cry. It's because something in the script says, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is how I'm supposed to behave. This is how I'm supposed to act. My whole church experience leading up until that moment in Harvest Fellowship with that group of people who just wanted to be Christians in the same room with each other, my whole church experience up until that point was just following a script. And there I realized at that moment that I was not in a scripted place anymore. I was in a place where I had to actually bring something to the table. And I had to wait for God to bring something to me through someone else. And there wasn't any kind of prepackaged situation that I could rely on. Up until that point, I had been a hypocrite. I want to help you quit being a hypocrite. Because, see, being a hypocrite is a big problem these days. You can talk to a lot of people and they will tell you that they're believers in Jesus. They'll tell you they're Christians. They'll tell you that they feel like this stuff is really important to them. And then the rest of the week, they never think about it. Someone might come on Sunday morning. They dress all up. They're wearing their nice clothes. Of course, I just wear my jeans and stuff. But they're wearing their nice clothes. And then the next afternoon, Monday afternoon, they're yelling at their kids. Or maybe they're being all nice and stuff on Sunday, but on Sunday night, they're beating their spouse. You know, there are all kinds of different sorts of hypocrisy, and it doesn't just have to be religious people. I'll give you an example. Every time you swipe a credit card, that's potential hypocrisy right there. Because that's me saying I have to follow the script of how the society around me flows. And so even if I don't have the money in my bank account or in my wallet, I'm going to still follow the script of how society flows, and I'm going to buy this thing. And I'm going to go deeper into debt because that's what the script tells me to do. That's what they say on TV. Buy this, buy this, buy this. See, all of us, if we would admit it, are hypocrites. And we're going to begin a series of conversations over the next few weeks where we're going to try to quit. We're going to try to quit pretending, and we're going to try to start living from the heart. So what I want to do is I want to show you a couple verses here. The first one up on the screen is from Matthew 15:8. We'll see this again later, but this is just the hint to get us going with this. Jesus says, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." And then talking about the heart, Jesus would say in another verse through an Old Testament writer. We believe that Jesus was speaking through Solomon when he wrote these words. Proverbs chapter 4 says this, "Above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life." Guard your heart because it's from your heart that life flows. So that's what we're doing. For the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about how to guard your heart and quit the pretend stuff so that life can begin to flow from you. You want to go on this journey with me? You think you can make it? You think you can handle it? All right, so then let's dig in. We're going to start off, and the first thing I want to tell you to quit is churchianity. I'm going to ask you to quit churchianity. And here we go. Matthew 15 is going to give us a definition of churchianity here. So flip open to Matthew 15. If you're using the Bibles we passed out, it's page 680. And we're going to read the first 9 verses here. Then some Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Jesus from Jerusalem and asked, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? They don't wash their hands before they eat." Jesus replied, "And why do you break the command of God for the sake of your tradition?" You see, what's going on here is these Pharisees are following a script, right? Someone handed them a tradition. Someone handed them a way of doing things. Their mom and their mom's mom and their mom's mom's mom told them that they needed to wash their hands before they ate. But this wasn't just hygiene. This was ceremony. They did a spiritual, religious ceremony every time they ate anything. Like many of us might say a prayer of blessing before we have a meal. They did this hand-washing ceremony every single time they ate something. But Jesus' followers didn't do that. And these guys were so uptight about that they would walk for hours from from Jerusalem to wherever Jesus was up in Galilee. They would walk for hours up there just to say to Jesus, "Why don't your disciples wash their hands?" Such a lame question. I don't understand why anyone would be so worried about why someone else doesn't wash their hands, except that they took the script seriously. And if the script says you do this thing, then you better do that thing. But Jesus says, wait a minute. You are nullifying God's word to follow your script. Check out what he says here. Verse 4, "For God said, 'Honor your father and mother, and anyone who curses his father or mother must be put to death.' But you say that if a man says to his father or mother, 'Whatever help you might otherwise have received from me is a gift devoted to God,' he is not to honor his father with it. Thus, you nullify the word of God for the sake of your tradition. You hypocrites!" See, what's going on there, Jesus says to these people, they've got this tradition that says you can dedicate money to God. And if you dedicate money to God, then you can't use that money for altruistic purposes here on earth. So if I dedicate this money to God, I can't give it to my parents to let them use it because it's only mine or God's. And if it leaves my hand, it has to go to God because this money is dedicated to God. It's still in my wallet, it's still in my bank account, but I'm labeling it God's money. And so if I'm going to get rid of it, it's got to go to God. It can't go to my mom and dad, but I can, let it sit and collect interest for me. And then I can live off the interest and stuff like that. But I can't give it to my parents. And Jesus says, wait a minute. God said, honor your father and mother. And now you've got a script that allows you a loophole that you can get around this. And so Jesus calls them actors, hypocrites. And that's not the meat of where we're going with this today, because now he begins to define what this script-following practice is. For the Pharisees, it was traditional Judaism. For us today, this script-following is churchianity. Look what Jesus says. Verse 7, "Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are but rules taught by men." Here we go. I'm going to give you a definition of what I mean when I say churchianity. And it comes from those lines right there. Jesus says, they honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. He says, they worship me in vain. And he says, you're following teachings taught by men. Here are the two aspects of what we would call churchianity. It's heartless worship, number one. And number two, it's human teaching. When you focus your energy on heartless worship. What is heartless worship? I mean, we just spent some time singing some songs, and hopefully you had a moment during that time where you said, you know what, God is here in this place. I can be aware of Him. I can sense His presence here in this place. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you had heartfelt worship. Because see, many of us